What's up guys, my name is John and welcome to today's video where we're going to venture into the wacky world of startups and kind of uncover some pretty dark truths actually. First thing that piqued my curiosity is how much money these startups lose. So in 2020, Uber lost $6.7 billion, Lyft lost nearly $2 billion, WeWork lost $3 billion and Grab lost $10 billion. And that surprised me because I order Grab all the time. We use it for taxis, we use it for food, all this kind of stuff in Asia. This raised another question really, which is how are these companies still around? So the ride-sharing app Lyft, they lose $1.47 for each and every one of their rides. So every time you ride a Lyft, they lose money. And it's the same as Uber. Uber lose 58 cents per ride. And what's even more bizarre is that this is a good thing. So CBC say why investors can't wait to buy into Uber, a company that's never made money and maybe never will. Like, they say it themselves. It's quite ballsy. And to be honest, I'm impressed that you can burn through $20 billion of venture capital money without ever making a profit. And, try to raise more money and say, quote, "We have incurred significant losses since inception. We expect our operating expenses to increase significantly in the foreseeable future, and we may not achieve profitability." It's pretty upfront. I respect the honesty, right? We may never achieve profitability. Like, can you imagine anybody walking into Shark Tank or Dragon's Den and saying, yeah, well, I've spent $20 billion, right? And, expenses are going up. And to be honest, I may never make any profit, right? Do you want to invest in me? It's kind of crazy. But to be honest, I don't even trust Shark Tank anymore because you can buy testimonials from them for like $1,500. But anyway, I digress. So I can understand that there must be competition in ride-sharing apps, right? And you need to discount rides and things like this. But when you're doing it to the extent where you're kind of rigging a market and creating a demand that doesn't really exist if you were charging a profitable price, I can see why taxi drivers are kind of pissed off, right? And it seems like the key to really stay in business in the startup scene is to not turn a profit. It's actually to sell a dream to investors. And I guess this is why they're called unicorns. So, quote, "The case in favor of these companies basically boils down to two ideas. They will make more money as people ditch car ownership and opt for ride sharing instead. And self-driving cars will turn them into autonomous cash machines." Self-driving autonomous cash machines. To be honest, I can't believe that $25 billion have been poured into Uber in 32 different rounds of funding because of autonomous self-driving cash machines. However, this gets me onto the topic of wacky Wall Street valuations. So like other prime examples of success, Snapchat has made stellar losses every single year. So in 2016, they lost $500 million. In 2017, they lost $3.4 billion. 2018, $1.2 billion. In 2019, they lost another $1 billion. Now, to me, this fulfills all of the criteria of a very investable company. So in 2017, they did their famous IPO at a valuation of $24 billion and they raised $3.4 billion from investors. And as a reward for his efforts, the CEO, Evan Spiegel, immediately sold $272 million worth of his shares, making him the highest paid CEO in America. And today, almost amazingly, Snap stock is at an all-time high. And you can read articles like this, which is it too late to buy Snap stock? Now, in fact, the top 10 unicorns have a combined valuations of $150 billion, all the while making less than $5 billion in revenues. And that's not even counting the fact that some of these companies like Uber deliberately make losses. So my investigation into the startup scene really just kind of gives me more questions than it does answers. So how are these companies not running out of cash? And this brings me to the investors. And this is where things, I think, get a bit dark. Now, when it comes to suspicious investors, the first name that really pops into my mind is Softbank. And they, of course, invested in WeWork. And I worked at WeWork for over a year. And I remember joking with my friends, when are they going to stop giving us free beer? Right? Because they used to give everybody free beer every single day. Every day after 5 p.m., right? You had 3 different beer towers and you could choose, right? And you're literally giving free beer to an entire office block, entire tower, right, of office workers. Everybody would converge on the free beer at 5 o'clock. It was crazy. And of course, SoftBank apparently invested an eye-watering $18.5 billion into WeWork, right? A company which, by the way, lost $2.1 billion in 2020. Oh, man. Now, the Softbank Vision Fund, right, the fund that invests in all these startups, also invested $7.7 billion into our favorite startup, Uber, right, which, just to remind everybody, lost $6.7 billion in 2020. They also invested $4.5 billion into Grab, which, again, lost $10 billion in 2020. Like, they're making all these huge investments into companies that lose billions of dollars. It's super weird. And if you look at this giant chart of investments that SoftBank is making, I have to wonder, how many of these companies are actually making any money? How is SoftBank, still alive, right? And the matter of the fact is that SoftBank in 2020, they lost $7.3 billion. And if you're interested, by the way, they are actively looking for new investment. So who's investing in SoftBank, right? Who would put money into this? And amazingly, the largest investor into the Softbank Vision Fund is the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. They have contributed $45 billion, right? $45 billion into the $100 billion fund. So government money, nothing quite like it, is there? Government money. So taxpayer money. Brilliant. And another big investor into the fund is Mubadala, which is an Emirati state-owned holding company that can be characterized as a sovereign wealth fund and is strongly connected to Mohammed bin Zayed, so the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi. And they've invested $15 billion into the fund. So to put everything into a kind of flowchart, right, you've got the people's money, right, the government money, taxpayer money, right, going into the Softbank Vision Fund, which is being used to prop up WeWork, which is then being given to me as my free beer. So it's okay. According to venture capitalist Chamath Palihapitiya, the entire Softbank Vision Fund may be a giant Ponzi scheme. It wouldn't surprise me. He says that in a presentation, the fund promised to pay fixed returns to investors, but these returns might come from their own cash, right? It might come from their own cash rather than the growth in the value of the companies they invested in. What? What? Isn't that great? Isn't that great? And to get back to the idea of using government taxpayer money to prop up failing businesses, this kind of reminds me of, the 2008 banker bailouts, doesn't it? And this was almost so long ago that I think, we forget about it. And I had to look it up and remind myself that the US Treasury actually gave the banks $200 billion. Morgan Stanley got $10 billion. Goldman Sachs got $10 billion. Citigroup got $25 billion. And this is an astonishing amount of money. And let's not forget that banks also make sizable investments into startups, like this one, which is called Shift. So, quote, Goldman Sachs just poured millions into a startup that wants to make selling your car less annoying. I click on the link and they can't even install an SSL security certificate on their website. The website is not safe. I'm not going on the website, right? $50 million into this company. Now, again, I want to iterate that I'm not an investor or business analyst. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe I've missed the plot. But to me, the startup scene seems like it's entirely distorted and a poor reflection of a market. So we have businesses that are failing businesses making losses year on year, being propped up by questionable investors who then get their money from, again, the taxpayer, right? It's totally bizarre. And as somebody who runs a small business, I'm really left with more questions than answers, right? I thought that the objective of, businesses and startups was to make profit, right? Profit for your investors, all this kind of thing. But maybe I've totally missed the plot. Now, to end this video, I remember having a conversation with a guy in the London startup scene. We were having a few beers and he told me, John, the objective really is to not attract new customers, but it's to attract new investors. And I think that really says it all.